Hi, I'm another fanfic critic, and do you know what time it is? That's right, I'm back, bitches! Time to review another shitty Game of Thrones fanfiction. But before we get into that, it's been a while, but I plan to be back for the long run. Woohoo. Some things have changed, most have stayed the same. Same shitty apartment, same cats, same beer, same cigarettes. Got a new job. I'm a hooker. No, I'm just kidding. I shouldn't joke about that. I'm a crack dealer now. But anyway, it's going well, and I'm glad to be back. So, let's get straight into it. This fanfiction is called Hearteater, named after Joffrey's sword. You know what I like more than anything about fanfiction? It's writing characters out of character, especially horrible characters, and then writing them to be good for no apparent reason, without explanation. Yeah, we're gonna get into that in a second. Like I said, it's called Hearteater. It's by Silent Writer 987. It's rated T. It's romance. It's Sansa and Joffrey. Yeah, that Joffrey. And that Sansa. For those of you who don't watch the show, Joffrey is the evil king born out of incest who's an absolute insane sociopath without a fuzzy feeling at all in his heart. And to show this, even when he was going to have sex for the first time, his Uncle Tyrion, the imp, I mentioned him in another story, got him 2 hookers, sent him to his room for his birthday, and you know what he did? He tortured them instead of having sex with them. Yeah, he's a doozy. And Sansa, the other character featured in this, is the daughter of Ned Stark, who was beheaded on Joffrey's orders, and they're pairing them together. Now, they were supposed to be engaged at the beginning of the series, but that was before all of this went down. This story is placed after Joffrey chops Sansa's dad's head off, and they're pairing them together. Well, at least they give us this little intro. Short one-shot Joffrey Sansa. OOC in the end. Well, let's not waste any time. It was a cool, peaceful evening in the house of Baratheon. Most of the Baratheon family members were asleep. The Lannister family members were also asleep. The servants were getting ready for bed. A perfect time to polish a sword. Joffrey Baratheon sat on the edge of his bed, carefully polishing the longsword, his beloved sword Hearteater, in his hands while his wife lay in bed, feigning sleep. So this is alternate universe too, because they never get married. Spoiler alert. Sorry. But if you watch the show, you can probably infer that, especially if you're watching the current season on HBO Sunday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. No, I don't work for HBO. I wish I did, though. I'd make a shit ton of money. Anyway, Sansa Baratheon couldn't sleep. Don't know why that's italicized. Not with her king out of bed, not by her side. Okay, it says OOC in the end. It's OOC in the fucking beginning, too. Doofus. Her heart beat faster with each swipe of his hand. Oh, 'cause he's cleaning his sword. Okay. Being married to him, didn't change much. Why is there a comma? He still treated her like a worthless peasant, when they were alone. Get rid of all these excessive commas, please. He was still cruel to her and his people. Okay, so this is in character. He still made threats to her family. And even though, oh god, if you spell check your work, it will point out accidental duplicate words. Just so you know. He never acted on his threats. Still, she feared he would. He threatened her sometimes, but they were empty. Maybe he was going to fulfill his threats right now? Okay, you basically just said that in the last sentence. I hate when authors do this. Okay, let's read that again. Even though he never acted on his threats, she still feared he would. He threatened her sometimes, but they were empty. Maybe he was going to act on them. You just said that. You do not need to repeat it again. This just makes the story move along very slowly. She was certain. He had his sword in his hands. Perhaps he would murder her and say she was assassinated? Sansa inhaled and exhaled, trying to calm herself, trying to stop her heart from pounding wildly. She was pale and sweating. Her hands were trembling. Ow! Sansa sat up, frightened by the cry of pain that emitted from her husband. She looked at Joffrey, who was clutching his hand, his face slightly scrunched up in pain. Haha, I love picturing Joffrey in pain. His sword was on the floor. She gasped as blood dripped off the blonde's hand and onto the floor. Joffrey's head snapped in her direction and he glared at her. Why are you still awake? She paled. Okay. I woke up to the sound of your voice, she stuttered. Okay, you don't have to say she stuttered if you're gonna do the thingy. God. She cautiously went to his side. Are you alright? She asked tentatively. Okay, and then they're starting dialogue with Joffrey without putting it in a separate paragraph. So, not only is the story moving along really slowly, it's also very confusing. Does it look like I'm alright? He said icily. You mean he asked? No, I. Why don't you go make yourself useful and get me a rag, he snarled, then muttered, stupid girl. Alright, still in character. Sansa, disheartened, stood up. So I'm still stupid to him. Of course, your grace, I'm sorry. She hung her head as she left the room and headed to the kitchen. The cook was surprised to see her. Why are you up at this time of night? The king cut his hand. I need a rag. The cook nodded and grabbed a clean white rag from one of the cupboards. Sansa accepted the rag, gratefully clutching it. Why are you up, cook? The queen wants tea. He looked at her. You should go now. I'm sure the king is waiting. Sansa nodded and muttered another thank you, then left. Is this story boring the fuck out of anyone else? I don't know, maybe I'm easily bored. What took you so long? Joffrey snapped as Sansa entered the room. He snatched the rag. Sansa sighed softly as she watched him wipe the blood off his hand, wrap the rag around it, then tie it. Not even a thanks, of course. Bloody thing, he said as he looked at his sword. I polish and admire it, then it cuts me. He grimaced as he clutched his hand. Sansa watched him, keeping her distance. Cold wind blew up her nightgown, and she pushed her skirt back down, shivering. If I'm no longer needed, I'll go to sleep, she said quietly. He nodded, not bothering to look at her. Sansa sighed sadly as she got under the covers. She wished that the king could at least respect her, now that she was his queen, excessive italics. He didn't need to love her, only respect her. She closed her eyes, fists clenched, tensing as her husband joined her in bed. She stiffened as she felt his warm body press against hers as a pair of arms wrapped around her waist. Okay, now we're getting into out of character. Oh, reals. Relax, he whispered. She nodded, relaxing her tense shoulders. They lay like that for a while in silence. You're not stupid, Joffrey said contritely. I'm sorry, he whispered, pressing his lips on the top of her shoulder. Sansa blushed. Was she hearing him right? Joffrey had just apologized to her. She lay a gentle hand on his. It's all right, my king, he nodded, then rested his chin on her bare shoulder, closing his eyes. Sansa closed her eyes as well, and drifted into sleep, a faint smile on her face. And that concludes the story. Wow, what can I say about this piece of shit? I mean, it's not the worst written story ever, and it doesn't have the worst content I've ever read. But come on. Really? For those of you who watch the show, you should be face-palming right now, like I was when I first wrote this. And for those of you who don't watch the show, refer back to what I said at the beginning about the characters. Wow. You know, I didn't even know that this ship existed. I don't know why anyone would want Joffrey and Sansa together. Well, there were some grammar errors. Excessive use of commas, excessive use of italics. The story was boring. And again, Joffrey and Sansa? Remember, Joffrey ordered the executioner to chop Sansa's father's head off. Now, Sansa may be a naive 13-year-old, but... and, plus, they never get married. The author should have put alternate universe in the description as well. Wow. I really don't know what there is to say more about the story. But, I'm sorry I read it, because I hated it. But I thought I'd do a Game of Thrones fic just to welcome myself back, and I hope you all missed me. I'll be making a cameo in Fanfic Critic's 200th episode. Hopefully, she's still planning to do that. And I plan to be back for good. And I will be shooting the next episode soon. I'm still taking your requests. It's just going to take me a while to get through them. Well, it's about that time. This is another Fanfic Critic signing off.